Let us elect leaders based on honesty, courage, moral vision, and deep selflessness. And those are the words of Father Simangaliso Mkhatswa, the head of the Moral Regeneration movement, who joins me now in the studio to talk about the political tensions that are being felt throughout the communities with violent service delivery protests taking place and some utterances by political leaders. But what should voters be paying attention to, and what kind of conduct should we display as we head to May the 8th elections? Father Mkhatswa, thank you very much for joining us and talking about this. And, you know, what you are saying about moral vision, honesty, selflessness, ideals, great. But in a contested terrain, people will make all kinds of promises that they know for sure they are not capable of delivering on. But the expectation is that people must buy the story hook, line, and sinker. So, wishful thinking, don't you think?
Yes and no. Wishful thinking in the sense that we're looking for the ideal. To some extent, it's wishful thinking. But what I'm also saying is that on the other hand, we have examples of men and women who were upright, who were responsible, who had moral vision for their people, were selfless, who exercise a servant leadership and so on. So which therefore means even in this particular case, when we call for such ideal leaders, we're quite aware that all of us remain human beings. But what we are emphasizing is that if you put your name forward to be a political leader, because let's focus on political leaders and so on. The reason being that they don't elect themselves, they're elected by the people. And therefore the people must trust them. You cannot have someone who is a crook say that is going to fight for the common good of all, for the freedom of the people. We cannot have someone who never tells the truth, you know. You cannot have someone who is timid. You need someone who has courage, who can even be bold when and if it becomes necessary, who does not always do the right thing in order to please people and so on. So those are the kind of leaders that we're looking for. It's one thing to be even an upright person in your private life, which is absolutely great. But here we're talking about people who have come forward and say, I want to ensure that the constitution of this country and all what it stands for is truly implemented and adhered to. I'm not here to fill my pockets and the pockets of my cronies, my friends, my families, my girlfriend, and whoever, but I'm primarily here to serve the people with all my shortcomings.
Father Mkhatswa, and of course you are saying it because the nation has gone through quite an experience, right?
Indeed.
And this may continue for some time unless people like yourself come forward and make this call. Having said that, however, there is the common typical refrain that you hear from those who get called out that, hey, not you, mister, or not you, ma'am, please step aside because the view we have is that you are not the right person to represent the people. But the common response is that we are innocent until proven guilty in the court of law. So as long as I've not been charged by any state agency, institution, or whatever, therefore you cannot judge me and say I'm a crook or I'm not worthy to represent you.
If you take the example of the IEC, when it pronounces on the suitability, acceptability of candidates or not, it adheres to the 4 or 5 legal principles, the criteria.
Yes.
You must be of sound mind, you must not have a criminal record and all the rest of it. That's fine, that is good. That is probably the barest minimum. But what we are saying as the people of this country, based on our philosophy of Ubuntu, is that the bar should be raised, that there are other criteria that should be added over and above those that are laid down by the law. Because you can actually be a schelem without ever having been arrested and therefore put on trial. are we now going to say, oh, because we have not been put on trial and found guilty, we must leave you alone? We are saying, no. If you come forward and you say we must vote for you, then there are certain expectations that the people of this country have. Because as a leader, whether you like it or not, people, especially young people, look up to you for guidance, for direction in their own lives, for inspiration, and so on. So it's a huge responsibility that you accept when you want to be a leader. So we're therefore saying that the bar must be raised for all those who want to play the role of leadership.
You are appealing to the conscience of such individuals who want to represent their constituencies at whatever level, politically speaking. But we live in an era now where there's a lot of money swirling around, and the opportunity to access that money, and of course the incomes that go with it. I mean, the salaries that can be a key motivating factor for some people who go into politics. So what about those motivating factors? I mean, you know, in a way, somebody can say,
Yes.
Father Mkhatswa, come on,
Yes.
man, this is not the 80s, you know, it's not the early 90s. We're in the business of politics now, and there's money to be made here.
Yes. Let's take a step backwards. If you look at one of the main reasons why the liberation movement, especially the ANC and so on, made such an impact on the world international scene, because of the way in which the leadership were men and women of integrity. They could be trusted. They had a vision. They knew that what they were standing for. They had discipline. They were selfless. And that is one of the main reasons that I think fascinated so many other people. I agree that there was no money to be made then. Maybe illicitly, yes, but I'm saying that you didn't struggle to earn a salary. If anything, you probably earn a prison cell or something like that. So then 1994 came, which was a glorious occasion for a great victory for the people, but it also introduced a new element of money, greed, selflessness, dishonesty, you know, all those kinds of values that were almost contrary to what Mandela stand for, Lillian Ngoyi, O.R. Tambo, Chris Hani, who's, you know, you were celebrating right now, and because he died in April last year, or rather 24 years ago. So those were sort of the models that we're looking up to. But it seems now something has happened that those values are no longer the most attractive. Having said so, though, I think we are quite right in saying that there are all these things that entice lots of people. People want to be politicians because of the glamour that comes with it. They want to be politicians because they can make money. And if you listen to the Zondo Commission's testimonies and so on, you can actually then realize that when people were in a position to put their hand in the cookie jar and do so systematically as a way of life, that's where the problem
Well, let's talk about the role then that Moral Regeneration Movement is playing. You've come up with a charter then, not only for the leaders, but also for the voters. Just take me through the concept, the thinking behind it.
The Charter of Election Ethics is premised on the realization that many people do not fully understand their responsibility, first of all, as voters. First of all, that vote, for me, in South Africa, given our background, the right to vote is no longer just a constitutional right. It's almost, for me, a sign of thanksgiving, gratitude to all the heroes and heroines who went before us, who suffered. Some of them who never enjoyed this privilege. Secondly, there are lots of people who don't realize the power of that vote, that you can make a difference in your life, in your environment, in the life of society, and so on. You have an opportunity to right the wrongs by ensuring that the people that are in leadership are accountable. They are there to do the right thing. We're also then saying to the IEC that we work very closely with, that you are doing a great job. but make sure that you do a job with integrity, with understanding, with accountability, with honesty, and so on, so that at the end of the voting process, when you announce the result, people are actually saying, should be able to say, this party, represented by so and so and so and so, really has our support, not just sentimental love, our support, because they are there for us, and we'll support them until kingdom come, if and when necessary.
But again, going back to the voters now, in South Africa, there's still a tendency amongst citizens to love their political parties and the ideologies that they stand for much more than the promise of the Constitution. And this leads to conflict and violence between citizens of differing political views. So we are not tolerant, in other words, of those who think differently and who choose differently to ourselves. What's your message to those?
Well, many people, of course, will vote because this is the party that we've known as a Mkhatswa family. We are going to vote because I've been promised a job. I've been promised some kind of a reward for supporting this candidate or that party and so on. People will vote because they hope that something will change for the better, especially in an environment where we still have a high degree of poverty, of unemployment, and our health system not functioning optimally and so on, a lot of violence, a lot of racism, or at least elements of racism still alive and so on. So people are looking for a hope. And therefore, if they vote for Team Modise, their hope is that this guy is going to do everything in this power to change this life for the better for everybody. And that's why then people become very gullible when someone comes along and say, I'm a prophet, I can make wonder, can perform miracles for you, and so on and so on and so on. Trust me, believe in me, give me money, and so on and so on. I'm just saying that that's one of the reasons what happened. And especially after the 9-10 years of our experience in this country, there's been a lot of national gloom, as it were, and people are looking for someone to give them hope for the future. But not only hope in words. Make sure there are jobs. Make sure that the land belongs to, back to the people who really believe it, that the education system is there to truly empower the people.
And of course, in a democratic system, that it is allowed that you can have a different view to a fellow citizen, and you don't have to fight them over that. Well, Father Mkhatswa, thank you very much for having joined us and talking to us about the moral ethical charter for the elections. We appreciate it. This Easter weekend, we'll also be looking at the different religious celebrations taking place around the country and asking, are these religions and practices true to your faith? Don't go away. We will be continuing the conversation in a moment.